Well, imagine you're about to take a long, arduous journey, during which all the odds show you're not going to come out of it alive. But you do it anyway because you're determined and you're committed. Such were the circumstances for these three brothers who grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Two of their brothers also served in the military. They all served in World War II. Their mother was known as a 5-star mother for sending 5 sons to the war. That middle kid, his name is Sam, and Sam joined the 3rd Armored Division. He had never been any further than the city of Chicago until he joined the Army. But in no time at all, he found himself in Europe fighting during the Battle of the Bulge. And when he reflected about that time when he was about to leave, he just figured, this is a one-way ticket.
I never thought I'd come out of it alive. That was my thought. I don't think I'll ever make it, because a war isn't a 1 week or 1 month deal. It's months and years, you know. We dug foxholes all the way from France all the way to Germany. From Germany, the Germans broke through, and they called that the Battle of the Bulge, and we got onto our heavy web carriers, and we left Germany, retreated back to Belgium, and I was in a foxhole all night with 2 other guys guiding the road, and at dawn they started shelling the position where we were. The 2 of the men that were in my foxhole, they left, but those shells were falling nearby. I thought, I'm not going to stay here, and I got out of there too. I was running up that hill, and then something hit me, and it was shrapnel that hit my thigh, and I saw them carrying a guy on a stretcher, so I followed them to a first aid station in a basement there. From there, they took me to Paris, and they operated on me around midnight.
So obviously, Sam survived. He made it back to his hometown in Milwaukee. He married his girlfriend, Bess, and eventually they had 5 children. I'm one of them. I'd like you to meet my dad. This is Sam Ted Busalacchi. You came to hear a TED Talk? Well, Ted just talked. I remember when we had this conversation. It was in 1989 at my parents' house in the kitchen, and I still remember their green linoleum on the floor, big round table. I brought my cassette recorder with no preparation whatsoever. I just winged it. And I just asked my dad about the war. I asked him about growing up in Milwaukee, starting a family, just all kinds of topics. And before you know it, I heard a click, and I looked down, and my cassette recorder had clicked up. The 45 minutes was up. And I said, oh, all right, Dad, that's it, thanks. And I just cut him off like that, and I turned it over, and I talked to my mom in sort of the same fashion. I don't recommend that way of interviewing for a family memoir. Prepare a little bit. But before you do that, you have to have some decent tools. And I learned a little bit about it in my radio experience. I did a lot of interviewing as a Wisconsin Public radio reporter. I started out as a 10-year-old with a reel-to-reel tape recorder interviewing my sister and my friends. I just had a good time with it, and I ended up turning it into a career. But you don't have to be a professional to do this. You really don't. You just need to have the basics. Get a decent microphone. They cost about $100. You'll get really good quality from something like that. If you're going to do a video, well, you got to have a camcorder. Those are pretty inexpensive now too. $300 or $400 for an HD video recorder. Just make sure you have a mic in on that thing, because if you don't have good audio quality, you don't have anything. You can have the best HD video in the world, but if your audio sucks, it's over. If you're going to just do audio, just get one of these things. You don't have to cassettes anymore. We have these digital players, and they're just wonderful. $200, $300 for those. Okay, so you have your equipment. You're all set to go, right? No, you're not set to go. Don't be like me back in 1989. Think about this a little bit. First of all, who are you going to talk to? It might be a parent. It might be an uncle, grandparent. And then sort of chart it out. What are you going to talk about? What would you want to know? Early childhood, lessons learned. Do you remember your wedding reception, what that was like? There are all kinds of things. And then the other really important thing, if, for instance, you are talking to a parent, talk to your siblings if you have siblings and ask them, is there anything in particular you remember or what you would want mom or dad to talk about? And that was the situation with this particular interview. This gentleman, his name is Gino. Gino also fought in World War II, but he was an Italian citizen at the time. He was fighting in the resistance, and that's the medal he got for being a commander in the resistance. And his daughter said, Now, when you do his memoir interview, make sure you ask him about the tree. Well, what she was talking about is he was coming out of the woods, and he's in this big open farm field, and who's coming in the opposite direction? German soldiers. He's out there all alone, and he sees this enormous hemlock tree. So he climbs the tree, and he lives in it for 3 days while they camp near this tree. He can actually hear him. So, of course, when I go to see Gino, I asked him about that tree.
I said, well, I climbed on top of the tree. I was about 40, 50 feet up in the air there. I was up in the tree, and then you hear him talking. I know fell asleep, but I took in my belt, you know, and then put it around the branches, so I'm not going to fall down. And then I waited 5, 6 hours to make sure. And then I got it down. If you don't know what's the kind of tree, where are you going to go? You got to go away in the open. They shoot you like a pheasant.
So I talked to Gino at a time when he was in late-stage cancer, and he actually passed away several months after we did this interview. The positive thing is the video was ready in time for people to view it when they came to say goodbye to him. And his daughter told me that he was just so appreciative of having his story told. He really liked that his friends got to hear about his life and talk to him about it and thought it was so wonderful, all the things that he'd accomplished. So when we do family memoirs, we're also honoring the people that we're talking to. We're saying, you know what, your life matters. I care enough to listen, and I care enough to pass this along to future generations. And especially when we talk to older folks, like this lady, she's 94 years old, in good health, with a great memory. She was just fascinating. Now, when we talk to people from another generation, they let us know about how things were back in their time, and it's just sort of amazing. She talked about what healthcare was like, completely different than what we know today.
There was a doctor in an office about 9 miles away, Briggsville, and he was a very kind man, and he knew that we couldn't afford hospital stays. So if there was something like a tonsillectomy or an appendectomy, he could come to the house, he'd spread it out on the kitchen table, a oilcloth tablecloth, and do the operation right there.
Now, can you imagine this? Knock, knock, doctor's there, and they do your appendectomy right on the kitchen table. These folks provide a window into a past life. You know, it's just absolutely amazing and a wonderful opportunity. Now, most of us are not going to live 94 years, and if we do, our mind is unlikely to be as clear as artists, and we probably aren't going to be so healthy. So it's probably a better idea to do these a little bit earlier in life and capture it. Here's an example of somebody who did retire early. His name is Rod. He was a very successful architect. And when you do these interviews, I swear there always will be something that's surprising. Sometimes profound, sometimes not profound, but surprising. So he had one of these. He talked about how he got interested in business, and he was a very, very successful guy and lived in just an enormous home. And he traced his success back to his childhood in one of his first jobs.
Probably one of the most interesting jobs I had, and I think back about a lot, was from the time I was 16 for 3 years. I worked at County Stadium in Milwaukee as a vendor for the Milwaukee Braves. Standing in front of thousands of people with a silly hat on your head and trying to sell a product, you become very much of an extrovert. And I think that really helped me throughout my life almost change a little bit of my personality.
Now, Rod said this is something he talked about a lot, or thought about a lot, but he never talked about it. Nobody had heard this before in his family until they watched his video, and they just thought it was a big kick. So now all Rod's stories are in a video, and they're passing them on to their kids. Sometimes we can honor somebody without that person actually being part of the conversation. I got a call to go to hospice. A lady, her name is Gail, had a very aggressive form of cancer, and her husband said, I want you to come to the hospice and interview my wife before she passes away. We want to capture some of her thoughts about her life. So I went out there, and what I found was a severely ill person. There was absolutely no chance that I was going to have any kind of conversation with her at that point. So I broke the news to her husband and said, this just isn't going to work. She's too sick. And he came up with the idea. He said, all right, fine. You interview me and my daughter and my son, and we're going to tell you about Gail, and then you're going to write something up for us. I said, fine, that's great. So that's what we did. I got my laptop out, and there were tears and laughter, and they were coming up with all these stories about what a wonderful mother and wife that she was, the most selfless person in the world. She planned every trip. She made sure everybody was taken care of in every way. And what he ended up doing with this is he read this to his wife and called it his love letter to his wife. She could still hear, she just wasn't able to communicate, and he was able to read that to her before she passed away. And then he did one other thing. He printed this and then he handed it out at her funeral. So we can honor people's lives even if they aren't able to participate. There are many ways to do these memoir interviews. There are no rules. You can do whatever you want, but do something. My dad had a chance to reflect on his experience. He went back to Sois, Belgium, S-O-Y, Sois, Belgium, where he was wounded some 60 years earlier. Only one time he came back with my mother, and this is the general area where it happened. And what's interesting about recording these memories is they mean more to you as you sort of age and have different stages of your own life. So I listened to something that he told me in 1989 that resonated a lot more today than it did as a kid in his mid to late 20s.
The Germans were giving up and they'd have their hands on their heads, they were marching. And we were going one direction and they were going the opposite direction, giving up. And this one German scooted across an open field. I could have shot him with the machine gun, I was right behind him, but I didn't. He's shooting me, so I let him go. Somebody else wanted to kill me, they could have been. But I had the best opportunity to mow him down, but I didn't want to. To this day, I'm glad I didn't.
Now, my dad told me that in all likelihood, this soldier was simply lost. It happened during the war all the time. But for me, I'm thinking, here he had this opportunity to take a life. These are the same people that tried to kill him about a year earlier. And he chose not to do that. The war didn't take my dad's humanity. And I feel good about that. So when I hear this recording, he still comes back to me. Our voice is our essence. And I have this tape, and it's not like I listen to it all the time, but on certain occasions, we bring it out and we listen to it, and it's just a wonderful thing. It's wonderful for me. It's wonderful that we can honor my dad's memory, and it's really great for my kids. They were too young to get to know my dad, but they're going to get to know him as they get older. And they're going to study World War II, and they're going to have a connection to World War II. Their grandfather fought in it. And it's just going to be a wonderful thing for them. So take the opportunity. If we don't record these family memories, they die with our loved ones. You're all here because you're different. You're listening to a bunch of speakers on a beautiful Saturday morning. Be different. Be the one in the family who says, this is important. Let's document what mom or dad has to say, or a grandparent or an uncle. You can do it. I hope you take the opportunity. Thanks.